You see, in every relationship that tears us apart, there's a deeper truth, one that most people never stop long enough to hear. The truth is that the one who loves quietly is never truly forgotten, because silence, when it's born from peace and self-worth, becomes the loudest echo in the heart of someone who runs. The avoidant, the one who distances, who hides, who fears being seen too deeply, they're not running from you, they're running from what they feel inside. They've built walls high and thick, not because they don't want love, but because they don't know how to handle it. Love feels like danger to a heart that was never taught safety. But here's the paradox. When you stop chasing, when you stop begging them to stay, your energy shifted. You went from force to flow, from fear to faith, and that's what they feel. Because energy never lies. You can tell someone you're over them, but the moment your spirit detaches with love instead of anger, something shifts in universe. The avoidant senses it. For the first time, they feel the peace they've always longed for, the peace you discovered within yourself. You see, quiet love is power. It's the kind of love that doesn't scream, "Look at me." It simply is. It's love without control, without manipulation, without the need to be validated. It says, I care for you, but I also care for me. And that vibration is rare. It's divine. It's healing. When you rise into your own wholeness, you become the mirror that shows the avoidant what they lost, not as punishment, but as revelation. They start to realize that the person who didn't chase them was the only one who truly saw them, because you didn't want to own them. You wanted to understand them. And when they finally face their own emptiness, they remember the calm presence you once offered. That's why they return, not because they need saving, but because they finally recognize safety. But let me be clear. The return isn't always about reunion. Each time they're coming back is the universe's way of showing you that you've healed, that your love was never wasted. It was transformational for both of you, and that's the real power here. When you stop proving your worth, you begin to embody it. When you stop chasing love, love starts chasing you. You became what they could not yet be, whole, peaceful, grounded, connected to something bigger than both of you. So if someone walked away and you loved them quietly, don't curse that silence. Don't see it as loss. That silence became your rebirth. It became your teacher. And maybe one day when they come back, not because of your words, but because of your energy, you'll smile, not with pride, but with peace. Because by then you'll realize you never needed them to return. You just needed to return to yourself. That's the moment you win, not because they came back, but because you rose so high that love could finally find you, through you. The power of silent love lies not in words, not in pursuit, but in energy, an energy that speaks directly to the soul. There is something profoundly magnetic about the person who loves without demanding, who cares without needing recognition, who stands firm in affection, yet doesn't lose themselves trying to be understood. Silent love doesn't mean absence of emotion. It means the emotion has matured. It no longer screams, pleads, or proves. It simply radiates. It's the vibration of peace that says, I love you, but I also love myself enough not to chase what isn't aligned right now. When two people connect, there's an energetic exchange happening beyond the surface, beyond messages, calls, or promises. One energy might be frantic, reaching, grasping to be accepted. The other might be fearful, withdrawing, protecting their space. This dance creates imbalance. But when one person steps out of that storm and chooses calm, chooses presence over pursuit, something remarkable happens. The energy shifts. That quietness becomes a gravitational force. It's not manipulation, it's alignment. The one who loves quietly is no longer broadcasting need, but wholeness. And wholeness always draws curiosity, always calls back what was once pushed away by fear. The avoidant personality thrives on distance because closeness feels unsafe. It reminds them of wounds they never healed, emotions they buried long ago. But silent love disarms that fear. It doesn't corner them. It doesn't invade. It doesn't chase. Instead, it stands like still water, clear, deep, and calm. Over time, that stillness becomes a mirror. The avoidant begins to see their reflection not as a threat, but as a possibility. They start to feel, perhaps for the first time, what it's like to be loved without pressure, without demand. The quiet love whispers, Pasha, you are free, and I still care. And that message, though unspoken, pierces deeper than any words ever could. Silent love also carries an essence of spiritual mastery. It's born when a person evolves past a attachment and enters into divine trust. Trust that what's meant for them will stay or return in perfect timing. It's a love that honors both souls involved, even if paths diverge. This kind of love does not operate from ego, it flows from consciousness. It recognizes that every relationship is a lesson in growth, not ownership. The quiet lover becomes a space of healing, not chaos. They offer understanding rather than argument, compassion rather than control. In that stillness, they access a higher power, the power of surrender. And surrender is not weakness. It is the strongest force in the universe because it says, "I'm enough, even without you." That truth resonates so powerfully that it cannot be ignored. The avoidant, no matter how far they run, feels it. They might not understand it consciously, but they sense it, a peace that contrasts sharply with their inner turmoil. They are used to relationships filled with noise, conflict, demands, and expectations. But this quiet love, it lingers. It follows them in silence, not as a haunting, but as a gentle reminder of what authenticity feels like. The power of silent love also lies in what it does to the one who holds it. It transforms them. They stop operating from fear of abandonment and start operating from faith in divine timing. They learn that love is not something you chase, it's something you embody. They discover freedom in letting go, strength in patience, and beauty in restraint. And paradoxically, when they no longer need the other person to return, that's often when the other person does. Because the vibration of genuine peace is irresistible. It communicates safety, stability, and truth. In this quiet power, love becomes unconditional, not because it accepts mistreatment, but because it transcends transaction. It stops saying, "I'll love you if," and begins to say, "And I'll love, because that's who I am." That is the highest form of connection, one that expects nothing yet touches everything. It's wa. By avoidance, always return, drawn not by guilt or manipulation, but by the purity of what they once couldn't face. Silent love teaches that the loudest expression of the heart is sometimes no words at all, just the quiet certainty that what's real never has to be forced. The avoidance inner conflict is a battle between desire and fear, closeness and control, love and vulnerability. At their core, avoidants crave deep connection just as much as anyone else. But the moment that intimacy becomes real, something inside them recoils. They start to pull away not because they don't care, but because caring feels dangerous. Love threatens the fragile sense of independence they've built to protect themselves from pain. To an avoidant, connection feels like exposure, and exposure reminds them of all the moments in their past, when being open led to hurt, rejection, or loss. So they withdraw, retreating into emotional distance where they feel safe or at least in control. But the truth is, company in control isn't peace, it's a shield. And that shield becomes heavy. The avoidant spends so much energy holding it up that they rarely realize they're keeping out the very love they long for. They tell themselves they need space, yet in that space they feel lonely. They crave affection but fear the dependency it might create. It's a cycle that keeps them running, away from pain, away from intimacy, away from themselves. Every time love gets close, their instinct says, "Run before you're abandoned." They flee to avoid rejection, not realizing they're rejecting themselves in the process. When they meet someone who loves them quietly, the dynamic shifts. That quiet love doesn't demand that they change, doesn't push for answers, doesn't chase after their retreat. Instead, it creates a gentle, consistent presence, one that allows them to breathe. For perhaps the first time, they don't feel cornered. The silent lover isn't trying to invade their space, but holds a calm energy that feels different from the emotional chaos they've known. That stillness confuses them at first. They're used to people fighting for their attention, trying to fix or decode them. But now, they're met with peace, and that peace begins to feel strangely safe. In that safety, the avoidant begins to sense a truth their mind has long suppressed. They don't actually fear love, they fear losing themselves in it. They've associated closeness with control, believing that to love is to surrender their autonomy. But when love stands before them without pressure, quiet, kind, accepting, they start to realize that true intimacy doesn't strip away freedom, it enhances it. It allows them to be seen without judgment, to exist without performing, to connect without losing their sense of self. And that realization shakes something deep within them. The inner conflict begins to shift. The fear doesn't vanish overnight. Old patterns rarely do. But the avoidance starts to question the story they've been living. They wonder why, after all their running, it's the calm one they can't stop thinking about. Why, in the silence of night, the memory of that gentle presence feels more grounding than any thrill or chase. It's because quiet love speaks to the wound beneath the armor. It doesn't fight the avoidance walls, it melts them with understanding. It shows them that love doesn't have to hurt. The avoidance heart learns through contrast. They may have left to find freedom only to discover that freedom without connection feels hollow. They may have chased distractions only to realize that the peace they crave exists not in distance but in trust. And when they finally come face to face with that realization, they're drawn back, not to the person, but to the feeling that person embodied. The quiet love that made them feel seen, even when they weren't ready to be seen. This return isn't always conscious. Sometimes it's subtle, a text after months, a thought that won't fade, a dream that lingers. But at its root, it's spiritual. The soul recognizes where it once felt safe enough to unfold. The avoidant doesn't come back because the quiet lover chased them. They come back because the quiet lover didn't. That lack of pressure allowed them to reconnect with their own truth. It revealed a form of love they didn't think existed, one that honors both connection and freedom. So the inner conflict of the avoidant becomes a doorway to transformation. When they finally face it, they realize that what they ran from was never love itself, but the vulnerability required to receive it. And when love appears again in its quiet, steady form, it no longer feels like a threat. It feels like home. Energy speaks louder than effort. Every human being transmits energy long before they ever speak a word, and that energy tells the truth. You can say all the right things, send all the right messages, and make all the right gestures. But if your energy vibrates from fear, need, or desperation, the other person feels it. Even if they can't explain why, they sense the heaviness, the pull, the subtle attempt to control. It's like trying to grasp water with your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. In contrast, when your energy becomes calm, grounded, and self-assured, it radiates peace. It no longer begs to be noticed, and that's when it becomes magnetic. When someone walks away, especially an avoidant, it's rarely because of what was said. It's because of what was felt. Avoidants are highly sensitive to emotional intensity. They can feel the charge of someone who's trying to pull them closer, and it triggers their instinct to run. But when the energy shifts, when the person who once reached out now stands still, whole and unbothered, something inside the avoidant begins to change. They feel a difference that defies logic. The absence of effort becomes more powerful than any pursuit. The vibration of peace sends a clear message, and I no longer need you to complete M. And that message speaks to the heart more profoundly than any words could. It's not that love disappears, it transforms. It goes from grasping to glowing, from anxious to aligned. This new energy carries confidence, not arrogance, openness, not attachment. It says, I'm here, but I'm free. And that kind of presence draws people in because it reflects safety, not demand. Everything in the universe responds to frequency. Relationships are no different. When your energy is anxious, you attract chaos. When it's peaceful, you attract stability. The avoidant, who once associated closeness with suffocation, begins to feel something unfamiliar, the pull of calmness. They can't name it, but they're drawn to it. It's the energy of someone who has found themselves, who doesn't chase or convince, who simply exists in truth. That energy feels like home because it lacks the judgment, tension, and emotional pressure that once made them flee. You can't fake this vibration. You can't pretend to be detached while your heart screams for attention. The universe reads what's inside you, not what you say. When you genuinely let go, when you surrender the outcome and return to self-love, the energy becomes authentic. You stop emitting the frequency of fear and start broadcasting trust. And trust, by its nature, attracts what's aligned. That's why people often return after you've finally released them, because your energy shifted from holding to allowing. The paradox of energy is that the less you try, the more powerful you become, because effort that comes from lack only creates more lack. But energy that flows from abundance creates attraction without effort. When you no longer chase validation, you become validation. When you stop seeking love, you become love. And everything that resonates with that frequency finds its way back to you. The avoidant may not understand why they suddenly think of you again or why your absence feels heavier than your presence ever did. It's because your energy, once tied to need, is now anchored in strength. That shift is felt across distance, across silence, across time. It's as if your spirit whispers, "But I am whole now," and something in them awakens. They remember the peace they once resisted. They start to see the contrast between your calm energy and the chaos of the world they run to. And in that recognition, a quiet pull begins. Not forced, not manipulated, but natural. This is the law of energy and love. What you embody, you attract. The more you force, the further things move away. The more you trust, the closer they come. So the true power isn't in the words you speak or the actions you take, but in the energy you carry. The vibration of peace, self-worth, and non-attachment communicates everything your voice never could. It says, I am love. I am enough. And that energy, pure and unshakable, calls back what was always meant to find you, not through chase, but through resonance. Healing through presence, not pressure, is the essence of what transforms relationships, especially when dealing with someone who avoids closeness out of fear. True healing doesn't come from trying to fix, convince, or chase another person into connection. It comes from embodying a state of calm awareness, a space where love is felt, not forced. When you approach someone with pressure, even if your intention is love, it activates their defenses. They feel cornered and their instinct is to escape. But when your energy carries presence, still patient, compassionate, it creates safety, and safety is the foundation of all healing. Presence is powerful because it communicates without words. It says, "See, I see you. I accept where you are." There's no agenda, no timeline, no demand. It's an energy that meets the other person exactly where they are emotionally, without trying to drag them somewhere else. Avoidants, by nature, are terrified of emotional overwhelm. They've learned to equate intimacy with loss of control. But present, CE invites them to relax. It tells their nervous system, "Mate, you're safe here." It's the energetic opposite of pressure. It doesn't demand change. It allows it to unfold naturally. When someone who loves quietly chooses presence, they stop participating in the cycle of pursuit and withdrawal. Instead of chasing, they ground themselves. Instead of pleading, they observe. This non-reactive energy becomes a mirror that reflects peace back to the other person. In time, that peace becomes contagious. The avoidant who once ran to protect themselves begins to feel curious. They wonder why this connection feels different, why it doesn't drain them, why it doesn't make them feel trapped. That curiosity is the first step toward healing. Healing through presence is an act of spiritual maturity. It means you trust life enough to stop trying to control outcomes. You recognize that your role in love is not to rescue, but to embody. You don't need to prove your worth, you simply exist in alignment with it. This creates an energetic sanctuary, one that others can feel even from a distance. The avoidant, who expected chaos, instead encounters calm. The mind that was preparing for conflict meets silence. The heart that expected demand feels ease. And in that ease, they begin to open, because the human heart always moves toward what feels safe. Pressure comes from fear of losing someone, fear of being unseen, fear of not being enough. But presence comes from love. Love doesn't chase, it welcomes. Love doesn't force, it flows. When you embody presence, you stop trying to control someone's timing, choices, or emotions. You understand that everyone heals at their own pace. You realize that pushing someone to open up before they're ready doesn't bring them closer. It drives them further away. So you shift your focus inward. You tend to your own energy, your own peace, your own wholeness. And as you do, your very being becomes an environment of healing for others, for the avoidant. This is life-changing. They begin to experience love that doesn't come with strings, expectations, or guilt. They realize that it's possible to be connected without losing themselves. This awareness starts to dissolve the old fear that intimacy equals entrapment. They begin to associate closeness with safety instead of threat. That's when healing begins. Not through arguments, not through explanations, but through energetic consistency. Your presence teaches them something their past never did. Love can be peaceful. Love can coexist with independence. Love can breathe. And once they experience that, they can never forget it. Even if they walk away, the memory of that peace remains. It lingers like a quiet echo in their spirit, reminding them that there is another way to love, one that doesn't hurt, one that doesn't demand, one that simply is. Healing through presence means becoming the calm in someone else's storm, not by saving them, but by staying anchored in your own light. The kind of energy that says, and I'm here even if you're not ready. And paradoxically, that very acceptance is what invites the other person to return, not out of guilt or longing, but because they finally feel safe enough to come home. The return of the avoidant is rarely about romance in the conventional sense. It's deeper than that, a spiritual return, not just an emotional one. When an avoidant comes back, it isn't simply because they miss the presence of another person, but because they are being drawn toward something sacred within themselves that was awakened by that connection. Love in its purest form is not about possession, it's about reflection. When they return, it's because they've finally begun to see themselves clearly through the mirror of the one who loved them quietly. That mirror didn't distort them with judgment or chase them with need. It simply reflected truth. And truth always calls the soul home. For someone with avoidant tendencies, love can feel like a bee. A quiet lover embodied the love they were afraid to receive, the peace they didn't yet know how to hold, and so their return becomes a moment of recognition, not a need you, but an I finally understand you. This return isn't always physical. Sometimes it comes in a message, a thought, or a dream. Sometimes it's simply an energetic acknowledgement, an inner whisper that says, now I see. Because what they were really returning to isn't the relationship itself, but the part of their own soul that connection awakened. The one who loved them quietly didn't just offer affection. They offered expansion. They showed the avoidant that love could exist without chaos, that intimacy didn't have to mean loss. That realization takes root over time. And when it blooms, the avoidant is pulled back toward the source, not out of longing, but out of gratitude. The universe uses relationships as mirrors to teach us what we need to heal. When two souls meet, one often becomes the catalyst for the other. Transformation. For the avoidant, the quiet lover becomes that catalyst. Their calm energy exposes the gap between fear and truth. It reminds the avoidant of what's missing, not a person but an inner connection. Their return, therefore, is symbolic of integration. It's the soul saying, I'm ready to reclaim the part of me I abandoned. This return may or may not lead to reconciliation, but it always carries meaning. Sometimes it's closure, sometimes it's renewal. Not of attachment, but of awareness. When the avoidant returns, it's because that seed has begun to grow. It's a sign that the energy shared was never wasted, it was transformative. That love touched something divine in both souls. One learned to love without fear, and the other learned to receive without running. The return, then, is not a victory for the ego, but a celebration of the soul's evolution, a reminder that love, when it's pure and patient, always comes back in some form. Because what's born of truth can never really be lost, it only returns when both hearts are ready to see it clearly. The one who wanted quietly becomes powerful, not through waiting, but through transformation. When they stop trying to prove their worth to someone who keeps running, their focus shifts from lack to abundance. Instead of chasing, they grow. Instead of begging, they build. Instead of clinging to what isn't ready, they nurture what has always been within, their own wholeness. This shift in energy changes everything. The quiet one begins to realize that their value was never dependent on being chosen by another. It was always inherent. In that realization, they step into a new vibration, one of peace, dignity, and self-trust. That's when everything they once chased begins to turn and find its way back to them. When you stop waiting for someone to see your worth, you start to embody it. There's something magnetic about a person who no longer seeks validation because they've learned to validate themselves. Their silence is not passive, it's sacred. It's the space where growth happens, where purpose takes root. The one who loved quietly starts to see the pain of rejection not as punishment, but as redirection. They begin to understand that love was never meant to make them smaller, anxious, or uncertain. It was meant to awaken the parts of them that had been asleep, their strength, their power, their voice. The quiet one learns that letting go isn't losing, it's allowing. It's creating space for divine timing to work. When you stop fighting reality, life starts working for you instead of against you. This surrender is not weakness, it's mastery. It's the deep knowing that everything meant for you will return in its highest form, not because you demanded it, but because you became aligned with it. When the avoidant returns, it's not because you waited for them, it's because your growth called them back. Your peace became louder than their fear. During the time apart, the quiet one often undergoes a profound transformation. They heal the wounds that made them chase, the insecurities that made them settle, the patterns that made them believe they needed to earn love. They start to build a life that reflects self-respect, one filled with purpose, creativity, and peace. That evolution changes their energy completely. They no longer vibrate on the frequency of need, but of fulfillment. And energy never lies. The universe and everyone in it responds to frequency shift. Suddenly, the very person who once withdrew begins to sense the difference. They feel drawn to the peace they once took for granted, not because the quiet one reached out, but because that peace has become irresistible. The one who wanted quietly doesn't return to the old story. They've outgrown it. If the avoidant comes back, they don't see it as validation. They see it as confirmation of their own healing. They understand now that love isn't about possession, it's about evolution. They're no longer attached to outcome. They're aligned with truth. Whether the relationship rekindles or not, they've already won. Because the real victory wasn't in being chosen by another person, it was in choosing themselves fully for the first time. This transformation is what makes the quiet one unforgettable. When they stop chasing and start growing, they embody peace, strength, and grace, qualities that can't be faked or forced. They move through life with quiet confidence, no low anger, desperate for love, but radiating it. They no longer need to speak to be felt. Their energy announces their healing before they ever enter a room. And that's why avoidants often return. Not because of guilt, but because they feel the difference. They sense that the one they left behind is no longer waiting in pain, but standing in power. The energy of peace is magnetic because it reflects truth. The avoidant recognizes, consciously or not, that the one who once wanted them has become what they were always seeking: safe, whole, and free. The one who wanted quietly doesn't chase the return, they bless it. They understand that every connection was a lesson, every heartbreak a teacher, every silence a seed. Through patience they found wisdom, through release they found power, and through growth they found themselves. In that space of spiritual maturity, they no longer ask, "Will they come back?" Instead they say, "Saul, I have come back to me." And that is the moment everything changes. Because when you rise into your authentic power, the universe responds, and everything that's aligned with your new energy naturally finds its way home. Thank you for taking the time to listen, to feel, and to reflect. Remember, every word you heard today was meant to remind you of your own power, the quiet strength that lives within you, waiting to be claimed. Growth isn't found in chasing what left, but in becoming what stays. You are already enough, already whole, already capable of attracting everything meant for you simply by being true to yourself. So as we close, carry this truth with you: love never leaves, it transforms. What's meant for your spirit will always find its way back, not when you wait, but when you rise. Thank you for sharing this space, for allowing these words to reach your heart, and for daring to evolve. Until next time, keep walking with peace, with purpose, and with faith in the timing of your life. Goodbye for now, and remember, your silence, your healing, and your light are far louder than anything you could ever say.